Hello, and welcome to Practical Christian Lessons. Happy New Year! And today we are going to talk about a unique challenge to the perspicuity of Scripture, really to understanding God at all. Hello, and good morning, but / good evening, because it's clearly a little more evening where I am. It's about, It's about 5 p.m., so the sun's unfortunately at an angle where it's just going to shine right in my eye. So we have this lamp here in the background. But Happy New Year, and I hope everyone had a good Christmas. We are going to be talking about a perhaps unique objection to the perspicuity of Scripture that some people probably haven't heard before. And it is a rather unique one. It was raised by the counter-reformers. Not all of them, but a few of them. Most notably by Erasmus. Some people might not classify him as a counter-reformer, but he did do some works trying to counteract the Reformation. Probably more because he was pressured to, not because he wanted to, which is why the work itself, though a good work in some sense. Erasmus was an extremely intelligent man during the Reformation, Counter-Reformation. He was a classical humanist, not what some people might think of humanists today, but more in the Renaissance sense, and was extremely intelligent. I think we can thank him for the Greek manuscript of the New Testament we have from that time period. He did a lot of the translation, if not all the translation for it. My details are a little fuzzy just from memory there. But he had a unique objection to the idea of the perspicuity of Scripture in particular. And it was that God is transcendent. How can the finite grasp the infinite? And was not a popular counterclaim for some obvious reasons that, if it's not obvious right away, we'll get into it. I only have a little thing written in my work on addressing this because it's really such an odd claim. But a lot of postmodernists seem to buy into this critique, and it's like, God is so far beyond mere mortals, how could we ever understand him? Which in a sense is true, but there's some problems with it. This book, A Clear and Present Word, The Clarity of Scripture by Mark Thompson, highly recommend. This is really good. You can see some of my own little bookmarks there, and I reference it in the work I'm working on right now. Where there's going to be a difference in what I'm doing, is, if it hasn't been clear in a lot of this channel, I'm addressing more like Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox who say that you need the church to understand Scripture. You can't understand it without the magisterium or the infallible tradition, whatever nonsense they want to throw out there. He addresses that a bit in this book, but most of this work, or at least not a far larger portion of this work, is addressing some of the postmodern critiques, and that includes things like people challenging manuscripts. It's really good and really short work in comparison. This is only, what is this? 170 pages, and most of them are like this, It's pretty readable and very, very concise. He's very good at writing well in smaller chunks. That is a skill, I promise you. It's not a skill I haven't myself learned necessarily. At times I can do it very well. At other times it'll take me a long time to really condense something down to a sizable chunk. But to this. So God is transcendent. How can the finite grasp the infinite? Is God transcendent and beyond us? Absolutely. Basil the Great was correct when he said that majesty and glory of God, insofar it is both uncircumscribable by words and incomprehensible by intellect, is not the sort of thing that can be articulated or understood by a single phrase or notion. Uncircumscribable is sort of the opposite of circumscribable. Circumscribable is capable of being, I hate when they use it, within a limit, or confined or drawn, right? The Lord, however you imagine God, as a Christian, clearly I'm going to imagine the God of the New and Old Testaments, is beyond limits. There's nothing we could ever do to hit the end of God. He's infinite. We're finite. No language we ever have will ever be enough. So that is a true statement in and of itself. That's in Basil on Christian Ethics, if anyone were to be interested. However, Erasmus and those that follow this objection say we cannot be certain of various things when we can in fact be certain. Or they say we cannot truly delve into the depths of Scripture because we are missing something vital. I wish to note this simply in passing here because it is raised by many today, and simply put, we will only be addressing but a small section of those who raise this critique. After all, Basil continued, rather, though a great many which have been adapted to our use, that is, the ability to comprehend, the God-breathed Scripture scarcely manages to speak but darkly to the pure in heart as in a mirror. That is the same section. It's on footnote 21 of that same page, 75. We can understand some of God, that which he has revealed. In our section in this work, when I finally publish it, What is God's Will for Scripture?, we address fully through Scripture how God has stated plainly he wishes to reveal himself to us in the Scriptures. Not in full, for we cannot understand his full glory, but he has, without any doubt, revealed himself to his creation so that we may have a genuine relationship with our Creator. God is apprehensible, as in we can understand and apprehend certain parts of him, but not comprehensible. That is from Odin's Systematic Theology, page 44, volume 1. Just because we cannot fully understand God does not mean we are unable to grasp that which he has revealed to us. This objection is simply very lacking. For those who wish to address those on the more secular or agnostic spiritual side of these arguments, I refer you to this book. If one is interested in the attributes of God, I recommend my own video going over some of these various attributes in my Trinitarian Apologetics, defending the Trinity with the Old Testament as a good introduction, with plenty of resources to follow up to go more in depth, should you wish to do that. And as I said, this is going to be a pretty short video. This is not an objection you hear a lot on. And I think Scripture itself gives us a very good reason to sort of dismiss this particular objection. When Luther responded to this in Bondage of the Will, one of his critiques of Erasmus was basically that he was just unwilling to commit to a stance on most issues. And that was something Erasmus did. He's just like, we can't be certain, therefore we can't take a stance. And Luther was like, just because you cannot be 100% certain of something doesn't mean you can't be mostly or a majority certain, and that you can't take a stance either way. Like, he just kind of laid into him, perhaps a little too harshly, but this is Romans 1. We are going to skip forward. Let's start with verse 8. I like verse 8 here. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for all of you, because your faith is proclaimed throughout the world. For God, whom I serve with my spirit by announcing the gospel of his Son, is my witness that without ceasing I remember you always in my prayers, asking that by God's will I may somehow at last succeed in coming to you. For I am longing to see you, that I may share my wish with you some spiritual gift to strengthen you. Or rather, so that we may be mutually encouraged by each other's faith, both yours and mine. I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that I have often intended to come to you, in order that I may reap some harvest among you, as I have among the rest of the Gentiles. I am a debtor both to Greeks and to barbarians, both to the wise and to the foolish. Hence my eagerness to proclaim the gospel to you who also are in Rome. For I am not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of God for salvation to everyone who has faith, for the Jew first and also for the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed through faith for faith, as it is written, the one who is righteous will live by faith. And I wanted to just open up with that because it's important. The gospel is open to all, and as Paul says here in plain words, God is revealed through faith for faith. So those who are faithful, and this is part of the doctrine of the perspicuity of Scripture as well, right? If you're not resisting the Lord, if you're not just so darkened, when you approach the Scriptures, you can in fact understand them. The Spirit speaks to you through the Scriptures, revealed through faith for faith. Faith, of course, being a gift from God. The one who is righteous will live by faith is a quote from Habakkuk. The next part is the really interesting part, and this is why, if that wasn't good enough on its own, this should absolutely just knock this argument completely out of here. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and wickedness of those who by their wickedness suppress the truth. And that flies in the face of things like the Confession of Dositheus at the Synod of Jerusalem, which is an Eastern Orthodox, sort of pan-Orthodox council. Whether or not many of them want to admit it is binding on Eastern Orthodox. And one of the things it says in there is that they cannot be aware of the judgment. That's one of the things. Like they say, Scripture is not clear enough on judgment and wrath to come. And I mean, they can argue with Paul. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. Ever since the creation of the world, his eternal power and divine nature, invisible though they are, have been understood and seen through the things he has made, so they are without excuse. For they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their senseless minds were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. Elsewhere, like in Ephesians, later in Romans, he talks about this darkening is through a willful resistance and rebellion to the Lord. Eventually, you're turned over to your desires and you're darkened. But Paul's words, I don't know how I could say it any plainer than is said here, right? It's revealed through nature, these things of God. God is such an efficient and effective communicator that he can communicate through nature his existence and the wrath to come for breaking of his laws. And people in their unrighteousness suppress that truth. And then, of course, when you get the Scriptures, his divine self-revelation, which is all the more clearer and all the more powerful, then yes, you can understand what God has chosen to reveal to us. So this objection just makes no sense. I really don't get it. And for anyone wondering, eventually we will get to this, what is God's will for the Scripture? That is part of a quote from Isaiah, right? The Lord's word accomplishes his will. It will not return to him empty. So I think that's all you need to address this claim. If you encounter a postmodernist and they're really set in their ways, this is a resource I highly recommend. But the objection just seems kind of nonsensical, because we have to be able to understand how people communicate. Otherwise, we wouldn't have society, which means we can't understand the words people have written in the past. Do we maybe have to go through some extra steps to understand these past things? Yes. Does anyone think the Lord hasn't revealed? If you ask agnostics, they have arguments for why they think God is clearly real. For anyone who believes in a deity, they have an argument for why they think that deity is real. They see clear evidence for it. So, again, if you encounter someone who believes this, feel free to direct them here. Open up Romans 1, read them Romans 1. Read Psalm, I think it's 19. One of the Psalms where it just says creation points to the glory of the Lord. And if you look into science at all, that seems to bear out very quickly. Things like cells don't just suddenly become far more complex organisms on their own. How there's life on Earth can't have just been complete randomness and chance. Everything is like just right to sustain life on Earth, and instead of other places which don't have those same circumstances to sustain life. Not just human life, but any life apparently. We're just the right distance from the sun. We're in just the right tilt of an axis. The moon's in just the right spot. Again, all these things. Gavin Ortland would be a great figure on this on his videos on the sort of like the video for an intentional designer or divine creator, transcendental arguments, things like this. Like, I recommend Gavin Ortland's channel if you're interested in those type of arguments more. Those are really effective in these types of things. But that's it. I'm going to keep rambling if I don't stop. So you guys have a wonderful new year. If you haven't seen our announcements, on this past Tuesday night's video, now, of course, there's some great practical advice for someone who's wanting to, as a Christian, delve more into your own spiritual practices. We also put at the end of that video our announcements for the plans for this year. So go and check that out if you want to know what we're going to be doing this year. There's a lot of great stuff coming and stuff that I have no idea what it's going to be. When the Lord opens the door, I'll step on through. But until then, we're going to keep on rocking. You guys have a wonderful day. God bless.